Welcome to Love and Money with Barbara Treadwell, where we explore the deep connection between our money and the people we love. Hello, this is Barbara Treadwell with Love and Money, and our topic today is going to be the multi-generational family business. And we are in rarefied air because Rex Templeton is our guest, and he is the fifth generation of his family business. Rex knows these stats, but I want our audience to know them too. 70% of family businesses succeed to the second generation, only 50% to the third generation, 20% to the fourth, and only 10% make it to the fifth generation. So Rex, I'm just going to hand it over to you and tell us how you got started.
Well, thank you very much. And it's great to be with you, Barbara. It always is. So our firm is Morris and Templeton Insurance. A little bit of history. My great-grandfather, whose name was William Beasley, started in the life insurance business back in the 1920s. He worked for a company called Life and Casualty Insurance Company of Tennessee, based out of Nashville, Tennessee. And then after World War II, he hired his son-in-law, who was my grandfather, Russell Morris. And then in the late 60s, he hired his grandson-in-law, who would be my father, Rex Templeton Sr. And then early in 1981, my great-grandfather had already retired. My grandfather retired, and my dad decided he wanted to go a different direction. So he and my grandfather split off and started Morris and Templeton Insurance, which is mainly a property and casualty-based insurance agency in Savannah. I studied risk management at the University of Georgia and joined in 1989. I've got a brother, Stephen, that joined in 92, a brother, Chris, that joined in 96. I've got two sisters, Amy and Lauren, that they've each raised 4 children, so has wore many hats, but have both worked in the agency. Both their husbands, my brothers-in-laws have been with us for 20 years, and my son Jonathan has been with us now for 9 years. So we've had a great ride. In June of last year of 25, and we can talk about this through the day. It was time for us to decide what do we want to be when we grow up. And we actually we have partnered and sold our business to a national concern, the West Coast, called Alchemy Insurers. So we can talk about that, why, and what, when, why, and how, and that sort of thing. But we're happy to be here.
That's fascinating. And we'll get back to the sale, but I'd like to go back just a little bit and tell me how you navigated the balance between the traditions that your family business has set and then being able to innovate and move with the market as it changes.
Sure. I mean, we're very fortunate that the traditions, and a lot of them are basically core values that my father set, when we started Morris and Templeton, which is everybody will describe him as honest, hardworking, and diligent. And those are the 3 things. He tries to treat everybody like they're part of his family. I'll tell you one quick story to illustrate it. I remember when I got out of college in 1988, he would call, make an appointment, let's go on a call. So I went on a call to him to see a man named Mr. Mosley, who'd since passed away. This was in 1988. Mr. Mosley was in his late 70s. I didn't know him. My father went to see him every month, and I didn't know why. Mr. Mosley drove a taxi cab for his entire career, and his wife cleaned houses and did books for people on the side, as a bookkeeper. My dad would go, and Mrs. Mosley passed away, and my dad would go once a month to collect his insurance premium for Mr. Mosley, and Mr. Mosley would have a stack of his bills, and my dad would write out all the checks for Mr. Mosley need to pay the power bill, the gas bill, everything, and he would sign the check, sign his name, and my dad would balance the checkbook. What I didn't know is that the only thing Mr. Mosley could write was his name. And he had nieces and nephews, but the only person he trusted to pay his bills and balance his checkbook was my father. And I remember watching my dad balance, and this is 1988. There was about $500,000 in that checking account from a guy who drove a taxi all his life, and his wife cleaned houses, and did books. And they just worked very hard and saved lots of money. And I remember one day Mr. Mosley called. He was mad at one of his nephews because he never came to see him, and he told my father he was going to leave all his money to him. And my father said, "Please don't do that, Mr. Mosley. Please don't do it, because everybody's going to think that I've just arranged this. I don't want it. It doesn't belong to me." But that just shows the kind of trust that the integrity my father has, and that's the kind of trust people had in him. And that's kind of the values that we've kind of set through. Once you set that course, you don't have to remind yourself who you are. Just do the right thing. And those kind of values don't change.
It's a wonderful story. And you know, of course, that I'm a financial advisor. And one of the most recent designations I got is a BFA, Behavioral Financial Advisor.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I do now with brand new prospects is identify the 5 core values that are important to them, because once we set goals, if they align with the values, then people make good financial decisions. And it showed that that is one of the traditions that stayed with your family. So were there challenges as you moved from one generation to another?
Yeah, and you can see it especially now so I am 58. I'm the oldest of 5. So my brothers-in-laws are a good 10 to 15, 16 years younger than me. Of course, my son is a whole lot younger than me. And the values don't change, but the way we act and the way we do business on a day-to-day basis from generation to generation change.
What
You
are
know,
some examples of those changes? What's different?
well, I think one is sense of urgency and the way we communicate with people.
Yeah.
And I'm not, and there are positives and minuses to both. I'm old school. I pick up the phone and call somebody on the phone. I'll give an example. I'll tell my son, "Barbara Treadwell would like to speak to us. Would you please give her a call?" Be glad to do it. I'll do it. So I'll walk in 30 minutes later. "Well, what did Barbara say?" "Well, I sent her a text to arrange when we can meet, when we can talk next Wednesday." Well,
Yeah.
and he did, and they would arrange a time to speak next Wednesday. I would have already had the conversation. So it's just a different set, sets. But I will tell you that his generation is a lot more, I think, organized informationally than I am, because I do get things done quicker, I think, but maybe not in the most efficient manner. We can get it done. So it's really a different way of communicating, a different way of doing
Yes.
business. But in our business, which essentially is relationship and sales, if you're in it, no matter how old you are, if you can't adapt and relate to people and develop it and kind of evolve your communication style to who you want to communicate with, you're doomed from the beginning.
One of the things that Kathy, my assistant, and I recognize when people retire is that what isolates them is technology, not moving around,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly communication. We still write letters and wait for a letter return with some of our clients who are 80 and 90 years old.
Sure.
They just simply can't do email, they can't do text, they can't do scan. So that has changed, no doubt about it. What about compliance? Is that a factor in your business?
Well, and we do not do as much. In 20 years ago, we did do quite a bit of, retirement planning, 401k, small employer sponsored plans, and that sort of thing. So compliance was a big deal at the time. We kind of vacillated out of that business more into strictly the property and casualty. So we don't have near the compliance issues that you would as an investment advisor. But we do have internal audits and audits by the insurance company to make sure we're keeping proper records, records of our communication, correspondence with clients. But it's not near as vigorous it would be, on somebody like in your specialty, for
Yes.
sure, for sure.
And what about conflict resolution among the family members?
Well, that's the whole different dynamic, because so the most employees the most people under one roof we've ever had were 16 people, and at least 13 to 14 were always related to each other in some part, whether it be through marriage, through cousins, through that sort of thing. Somebody asked me what my hiring plan was. I said, "Well, my sisters are both married, so unless they get divorced, I don't know what it is."
Yes.
Um, and conflict resolution is different generationally too. I think,
Talk to me about that a little bit.
my father's generation, he's 80, was if there's an issue, you sit in front of somebody, you get it done, we move on. Um, Mine was a little bit more subtle, massaging it for good and for bad. Sometimes it's good just to get it over with and move on. Um, the younger generations try to work it out through text and email, and and I'm a believer in getting on the phone and let's working it out, because email doesn't have emotion, it doesn't have inflection. You take the different mean. So just and the other part of with generational conflict resolution is we see problems differently. You know,
Yes.
and approach them differently. So unless you sit down and really hear, so it's up to me as the manager or as the president. I really need to listen to really see, if I tell them something, I really need to ask them what they heard. I know what I said, but I don't know exactly what they heard. And then I can, once they can repeat it back to me, then I can at least see what is their frame of reference, and what page are we on. Make sure we're on the same page as we make decisions, and as we get as we close the loop on any conflict we may have.
Were there ever any non-family people in leadership roles?
No, not really.
No,
We've had
no.
non-family producers. Fortunately, they're all 20-year plus. They stayed with us many,
Yes,
many years. So you
yes.
can, you can use the family term loosely on that.
Uh-huh. No, it's
Um,
remarkable. And
that's right.
what about spouses working in the business together?
My wife has dabbled and realized that it was stronger for our marriage for her not to do that. She made that realization, not me. Um, it works for some couples, very good. We have a very close relationship and spend a lot of time with each other, but a little time, you know, she knows what's going on in my world, and I know what's going on in her world, but it's not bad having different worlds sometimes. But my mother has always worked within the agency, throughout my entire life. And so and she and my father had a wonderful working relationship, and been married 60 years. So I've
Yeah.
obviously, and it's a very family environment. I mean, you come in, I'm the oldest of five. My parents have 19 grandchildren. So at any time you could come in during the day still, although my kids are grown, after school, their kids running around through here and in the conference room, and so it's a very family environment. You know.
My parents were married 67 years. And when my dad retired, my mother had to say to him, "Si, dear, I love you for better or worse, but not for lunch."
That is,
It would not have worked. They had a wonderful marriage, but it would not have worked for them to work together.
and I'll tell you a quick one. My wife did work for us for a little while, and I talk loud when I'm on the phone. I think part of it is I've always had a lot of older clients, so I have to talk louder on the phone. So I was on the phone and she could hear me in the hallway, and she walked in. She said, "Keep it down. You're talking too loud." And I said, "Don't correct me when I'm on the phone with somebody." And she said, "Well, I quit." I said, "Yes, ma'am. I'll see you later." And that was her last day of work.
Now we get the real story.
That's exactly right.
Oh, that's wonderful. I don't consider that a failure, but did you ever have an experience through the generations where a failure led to enlightenment of some kind and a success story in the end?
Well, it's success, and then we've tried to. They say keep personal life and business life separate. Well, you can't do that with a family business,
No, no.
because we've always viewed the business as another member of the family. So when you're sitting around a dinner table, we've always thought that one chair was for the business almost. It's a different entity. So it's brought into the family, it's brought into all the discussions. And we have disagreements on way to handle things within the office, with my brothers or my son or my brothers-in-laws. Um, and we've had time where, we're all pretty mild-mannered people, but in any business or any relationship, things can get a little heated. Um, which spills over. If I make him mad, then he tells my sister, who's his wife, which makes her mad. So you can imagine it spills over. And they've been some instances that where, but you just have to step back, get to the core issue. What's the issue between us, and let's try to solve it. And so we've had our differences, but fortunately, no, it's never ruined anything. Thank goodness.
And those core values keep you hold those close to your heart, but certainly leadership styles must change from one generation to another.
They do, and remember the business we're into, which is the insurance business, which is productions business, which is commission-based business, and we have what we call an eat what you kill mentality. So my income is based upon the effort that I make and the business that I bring in. So because of that, hierarchy is not as important, if that makes sense. Because my son or my brother-in-laws or my brothers, whatever they produce is what they bring home, and that's what their income make. So I don't determine what their compensation is. The effort they put into it determines where their compensation. So our business is a good model for a family business, I think, because
Yes, it is.
we're not there. But that in mind, somebody's got to be in charge to be able to make a final decision and delineate, different, activities within the office. So it gets, but we know to sit around a table and let's figure it out. And if we don't agree, then we take a vote. If there's 9 people, 5-4 is not always a win. We say, well, let's keep talking about it until we get down to more of a consensus. But if we can't, then we have to know, who's appointed to be the one to make the final decision. And right now, that's me. So,
Do you remember when you were first aware that there was a family business and that you would be a part of it?
yeah, because they started the business, and the insurance business has always been in our family, since
Uh,
the day I was born. Our business started in 81. So, I remember when we started, I remember my father leaving early in the morning and coming home later at night. Because as building your practice, the times we see people are the times they can see us. So, there'd be a lot of night appointments. There'd be a lot of early morning appointments. I remember being as a young child, we had one car of a Volkswagen VW Beetle. And I remember going to the appointments and sitting in the car with my mother while my dad was inside,
yeah.
conducted his business. So the culture was always there. Um, when I went to college, I dabbled with pre-med until I took organic chemistry and decided to go to business school the next semester. Um,
Process of elimination.
that's exactly right. But I knew that we had a business that was growing. I have a lot of respect for my father and my grandfather. So I knew pretty much from the time I was about 20 years old that what my career track was going to be. But it wasn't pushed upon me. It was offered, and with the challenges and everything, I was welcome to come in if I wanted to make the effort. So I have 3 children. One is in the business. The other 2 are not in the agency just because they choose not to, went a different career path, which is wonderful. So, we try to make it the avenue is there, but without being a fallback option either. You have to prove that you want to do it and do what you have to do to succeed. We're not here just for a paycheck.
Yes, I have another family business who are clients, and they insisted that their children go off and do other jobs before they come
Mhm.
back into the family business. And
I,
3
I
chose
think
to do that and 1 didn't.
I think that's a good. I don't think that's a bad model. My son, who is in business with us, did work for an insurance company for a year.
Uh-huh.
Because see, this is the only place I've ever worked. It's the only place my brothers have ever worked. It's the only place my sisters. So we have a tunnel vision of what work should look like or the way an office should run. So we really, we like to get as much, and we need help on a lot of things. Just because it's the way you've done it this way for 50 years doesn't mean you're doing it right for 50 years. So that extra, you know, an additional viewpoint is always helpful. Is always helpful.
Talk to me a little bit about your role in the community and
Hmm.
how active you are.
Sure. And my father was always very active in the community, basically through his children, coaching basketball and football and being on the boards of the YMCA and that sort of thing. And that's a model that I jumped in. I enjoy that kind of stuff. In my early business life, I was involved very actively politically from the late 80s, probably into about 2000. I've been on the board of a hospital, board of a bank. So giving back was very important. Building a business as a young person, and like I tell people when they start out, The mistake I made was getting involved in too many things too fast. Not that involvement is bad, but you get spread so thin, you don't do a good enough job at each one of the each one of the
Mm.
organizations. So I'd recommend, and I tell folks, pick 2 or 3 things that you're really interested in, get exposed to them, and then hope to find the 1 or 2 things that you can really make a difference and devote your time to. Um, Somebody gave me a piece of advice once. He was in the insurance business. He said, when you join an organization or when you volunteer for an organization, make it a commitment not to call on anybody professionally or solicit anybody professionally for 3 years, but devote that 3 years to the organization, to doing your best, to do it, to really being if you're a board member, be a good board member. If you're a volunteer, be a good volunteer. And that's kind of, when he told me that, I took that on as a premise. And, I never had to wait 3 years for people started to approach me to do business with them. Because when they see how you act and they see how you commit to a task and you devote yourself to whatever the mission of that organization is, they know that spills over to your professional life and they seek you out. So I've been very involved in the community. So in the beginning, to my discredit, but I think that in the long term, it's gave me a lot of personal satisfaction. But it's helped build the brand and build our name and our reputation at the same time.
So now tell me about that there will not be a 6th generation. And ironically, when I checked the statistics, it didn't go beyond 5th generation. And here you are, you're the 5th generation and you've sold the business. So how in the world did that happen? Tell me about that process.
Sure. Well, as we were starting out, as we were a couple of years ago, like a lot of family businesses, and Barbara, you're an expert, and you can attest to this. We were 10 or 12 years too late in talking about succession planning. What should come next for the entity, for the enterprise, for the business? And when you're a family and everything's going great, you just kind of keep plugging along, doing what you do, and kicking the can down the road. But my father, has Alzheimer's, it was time for us to decide, okay, what comes next? Do we want to stay as we are? How do we want to grow? Do we hire people? Do we acquire people? How long do I want to stay in it? How do I get out if I want to get out? I mean, we just started asking those questions. And working with one of our legal advisors, he said, well, did you ever think about selling the business? And that was anathema. No, we would never sell the business. I mean, like I said, the business is part of the family. We would never do that. And we've educated all these kids and we're all eating off of it. Good Lord, that's like a divorce. I mean, we just wouldn't do it. Well, he said, well, you owe it to yourself to at least check into it. So we hired an investment banker from New York to come in, for the lack of a better term, do an appraisal of what he thought we were worth. It was higher than what we thought. So we said, well, maybe we should go out to the marketplace to look. So we interviewed 18 different people nationwide, not only for money, but for fit and culture, which we'll talk about. And out of 18 people, we had 17 offers. So then the next step was, well, who do we want to be married to now for the next 50 years? And we were looking for the right culture fit, one that shared those same core values that we talked about, 2 that respected the brand and the reputation we have in the community. And we wanted that to be part of what drew them to us. And that would also mean that they would also work for us to help keep that brand and keep that reputation. Because in our business, we're not selling equipment and we're not selling property.
No.
All we've got to offer is
Service.
our service and our relationship and our reputation. And we think we found somebody that would do that provides us the resources we need to grow and recognizes the value that we have within our community. So, like we're basically still running this business center and this operation. They like the fact that we have a next generation that may want to come into the business because it keeps it growing. It keeps it moving. I mean, they didn't buy us to be stagnant. They want us to keep growing. And they
So
want
you've kept the name. You've kept the name
And
and all the people.
That's correct.
You just
That's
have a
correct.
different owner.
That's correct. So they like the fact that we've got a growth plan for the future now.
Yeah.
They now bring to us some resources and tools that we didn't have to enhance that growth plan.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a tough decision, but long term, I think it's going to be good for all of us.
I wish you all the best with that. So This has been, actually, I love your philosophy as well as all of your information. There are some sayings that you have that I'm going to save and use. But I would like to ask you what advice you would give, and this is my last question, unless you have other
Sure.
things that you want me to know about, but what advice would you give young entrepreneurs who have a family business and they would like to have a legacy? They would like to leave that business
Sure.
to other family members. What would you advise them to do?
Well, the one thing is, like I said, protect that family business entity as if it's a member of the family. Okay. Keep it healthy. We have so many people, we've seen so many businesses fail because they live out the cash register of the business,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh, just let the business pay for it. Just do that. Well, the business has to, if the business is not a valuable option, a viable entity, it's not going to support anybody. So try to keep that business as sacrosanct and sacred as you can, that is its own entity, and to try to keep it healthy as you will. That business's mission is support the family. Okay. But like we say, without the proper margin, there is no mission,
Yes.
if that makes sense. So try to protect that entity as much as you can. Know that family dynamics come into play. What I think about the business may be totally different than the viewpoint of somebody else in the family. Because it's different does not mean that it's not equally as important. So you really need to be as inclusive as you can. Some mistakes we've made in the past is maybe kept things too tight instead of being as transparent among family members as we could. The more everybody knows, the more everybody can contribute, the more everybody can help. So I would say transparency, and then just keeping the entity as healthy as it can, and know that if it can't survive, then the family can't survive.
Well, it's a wonderful story, Rex. I mean, you're really to be commended. I've been your client for 25 years, and I've learned some things today that I didn't know. It's
Well, thank you. Well, you're
fascinating
wonderful.
conversation.
Well, you do a great job. Well, we get a lot of respect for you, and we not only that, we value friendship as well. So
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
great, good to talk to you. Have a great
You
day.
too. You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining me on Love and Money with Barbara Treadwell. I hope today's conversation gave you something to think about as you navigate your own financial and personal journey. You can also visit barbaratreadwell.com to learn more about my work and connect with me. See you on the next episode.
The views expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the opinions of Barbara Treadwell, LLC, and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities or services mentioned herein. Unless otherwise specified, show guests are not securities licensed or affiliated with Barbara Treadwell, LLC, or Osaic Wealth. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should only be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Securities and investment advisory services offered through Osaic Wealth Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Osaic Wealth is separately owned, and other entities and/or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of Osaic Wealth.